Hello and welcome to Wellness by Design. I'm really delighted today because I've got a guest here to talk about the connections between the gut, the brain, and the immune system. It's all well, we are all related. So I'm really delighted to talk with Dr. Peter Kahn about this topic. So welcome, Dr. Kahn.
Thank you so much for having me, Jane.
Really happy to see you again. We were just at two back-to-back conferences together, so we've gotten to know each other for the first time in person, which was really wonderful. And so it's great to see you again here online. Um, so we want to talk about the brain and gut, and this is your special background. I want to make sure I get your certifications right because there's a few of them. So you are board certified in integrated medicine, functional medicine and a board certified chiropractic neurologist. That's really interesting. So you were born in Taiwan and immigrated to America when you were a teenager. And what led you to be interested in this connection between the gut, the brain, and the immune system?
Yeah, first of all, just thank you for letting me share. I think my journey started when I was, college. I mean, my whole life I love sports, very active. And when I went to college, I didn't know what I want to be. I ended up becoming an exercise physiology major because I thought, hey, why not just study the thing I like to do, exercise and sports? But I didn't know what to do with that after I graduated. So, got sales jobs for about 3 years and then ended up going back to chiropractic school. And, during chiropractic school, I really got exposed to functional medicine at that time. It wasn't called functional medicine back then. It was more applied kinesiology. It was looking at the connection between nutrition and muscle response. So that's really started me down the road of being interested in nutrition that way. And then through personal circumstances, my father had cancer, liver cancer, stage 4. They told him that he has 6 months to live. And through the little bit of things that I knew, this is when I was in chiropractic college. My brother and I, he's also a doctor. We helped my father make some lifestyle changes and taking some specific supplements. And lo and behold, he actually lived 5 years relatively symptom free. Doctor was like, whoa, what's going on with this guy? Why is he still here? So that was my first experience of, wow, the body has an amazing ability to heal itself if you can just get out of the way and let the body heal. And then my own children, a couple of them had severe allergies, and one had a severe burn injury that led them to have asthma and allergic responses. And that led me down the road of functional medicine, looking at food allergies, gluten sensitivity, leaky gut. And as I started going to practice by implementing both the nutrition along with chiropractic neurology, which is a subspecialty within chiropractic that really look at brain function, I was able to marry this nutritional aspect with the neurological aspect. And I saw my results really just accelerated. And people got a lot better, a lot faster when I addressed person both neurologically and metabolically. And that's where this concept, through just working with over 6,000 clients in my career, I started to see that there's a pattern between brain, immune, and gut, that they're all connected. And there's a set of symptoms that are very characteristic that shows up for people with these brain, immune, gut dysfunction, despite what their diagnosis is. Meaning, you can be someone that perhaps had mold exposure, and you might come to me and you might complain about symptoms in the brain, in the immune system, in the gut. And then, or you can be someone with Lyme disease and you come to me and I'll see the same set of symptoms, brain symptoms, immune system, gut symptoms. And you might be somebody with Hashimoto's that come to me. We'll see the same thing. You might be someone with fibromyalgia or chronic pain. We'll see the same thing, brain, immune, gut. This recurrent thing that these three systems are connected that's creating the dysfunction. So it became no longer a game of addressing the diagnosis, but rather looking at the underlying mechanism, the brain, immune, gut. And that's really what I started to teach people, how to even, identify this in themselves and be proactive and be able to do things to get better.
And you've got that acronym big, right? Brain, immune, gut is very convenient. Yeah, so these are connected together. Um, and so when you see this, what are some of the symptoms? I mean, when people have gut symptoms, they kind of know that. Or they might be noticing, brain fog. But what are some of the other symptoms that you'll see?
Yeah, and that's a great question because I think for layperson who don't have medical training, they may be thinking about the symptom in a very compartmentalized way or isolated way. But when we say brain symptom, for example, we're not just saying brain, we're saying neurological symptoms, right? Which includes the brain because your brain has a central nervous system. You also have the peripheral nervous system, which goes all the way to your fingers and the toes and tell you about sensation. So when people have neurological symptoms, that can be central, which means brain. And this might be brain fog, short-term memory loss. They may feel fatigue. People say fatigue, is that a brain symptom? Well, absolutely is. I mean, that's where you experience fatigue. I mean, you don't experience fatigue in your buttock muscle. That would be considered a weakness, right? Like if you have a nerve impingement, radiculopathy to C5 to your bicep, then you have muscle weakness. But you can have muscle weakness to your bicep because of a nerve pinch, but not feel fatigued. You just have weakness in your bicep. So fatigue is a central nervous system phenomena. So when you have fatigue, you got to just fess up and say, wow, I have a brain symptom, because that's what it is. Now, other brain symptoms can be depression, anxiety, lack of motivation. You can also have peripheral nervous system issues such as numbness, tingling. We call these paresthesia. It can be neuropathy related, but could be other things related as well. Chronic pain, by the way, is a neurological symptom, right? When you have pain, what is that? That means your nociceptors are firing at a threshold that's allowing that nociception, which is pain sensation, to reach your brain and for your brain to interpret that as pain. So there's a limbic component to pain. There's, this emotional component to pain. There's suffering in pain that is related in our, emotional lobes of the brain. But then we're creating nociception all the time. We have this pain sensation generated all the time. But until it pokes through this threshold of consciousness, we don't actually perceive the pain. So when we feel pain, sometimes it's a problem with our blood threshold, in that the threshold has been lowered, so therefore you feel the pain easier. So that's one mechanism that you can generate pain. And this can kind of lead into our second category of immune system problems.
It's really interesting the distinction you made between the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system in the brain. And some people may not be thinking that numbness or tingling in their fingers or their toes might be a brain issue. So I really appreciate that. Okay, so let's go on to the immune system.
Right. So with the immune system, one of the things that the immune system can do to modulate is that when you are inflamed, there's specific receptors for inflammatory cytokines in specific regions of the brain. For example, in the midbrain or the mesencephalon. This is a region in the brain where the sympathetic nervous system actually arises in your brainstem. And this area, because it mediates the fight or flight response, it has a lot of receptors for inflammatory cytokines, which are these immune messengers that trigger inflammation. So when you have a lot of inflammation, and therefore you have a lot of inflammatory cytokines circulating your blood, that area of the brain will pick up these chemicals in the blood. It'll tell basically your brain to say, oh my gosh, we're injured, we're inflamed. There's all these inflammatory cytokines, alert, alert. And then it fires off a sympathetic response. That sympathetic response in turn can actually lower the threshold for nociception perception. So therefore, you start to feel pain sooner than you would otherwise. And this is a mechanism of central pain sensitization in the literature. Central pain sensitization means that your central nervous system literally is adjusting the pain threshold at which point will you feel the pain due to some type of inflammatory response. So again, if you're inflamed, it might lower your pain threshold so you feel the pain easier. So this is how some people can actually have a central nervous system phenomenon driving pain, but one of the reasons for that is actually inflammation. So when we say immune system, we're not just saying whether you have an infection or not, because the immune system's job is to kill infection, but the method at which it uses to kill the infection is through inflammation. So inflammation is not good or bad. It's just a natural body response to kill an infection or to clear up cellular debris. But if that process goes on too long and unabated or not dampened, then you're going to have excess tissue damage, and that can trigger additional inflammation. So when we say immune system problem, many people think, oh, I'm catching a bug, I get sick easily. But this also extends to people with chronic inflammation, which is pain, or people with autoimmunity, which can be inflammation in various tissue, Hashimoto, thyroid, or they have rheumatoid arthritis in the joint, or they have celiac disease where autoimmune affecting intestinal tract. So they can have inflammation, they can have autoimmunity, they can have pain, and they can have immune system challenges. So that's the immune component of it. And again, doesn't matter what the diagnosis. For people with chronic health issue, they usually show up with these brain symptoms, they show up with these immune symptoms, and then that can also start to cause gut issue, which is our kind of the third triangle, the third leg of this brain immune gut triangle. And when it comes to gut, again, as you said earlier, Jane, most people kind of understand what that means, right? You may experience gas, bloating, reflux, heartburn. You may have constipation or loose stool. You may have alternating constipation, loose stool, diarrhea. Or you may have gut cramps. You may feel pain in the gut or IBS. So these are common gut symptoms. I think sometimes people think they have leaky gut, which is also very common state, but know that leaky gut doesn't necessarily manifest as gut symptoms. Leaky gut often manifests as an inflammatory issue. In fact, the definition of leaky gut is an inflammatory condition that mimics an autoimmune disease. It just happens to start at the gut, but the effect is system-wide. So when people have leaky gut, they may not have gas and bloating. They may, but oftentimes the symptom of leaky gut is simply just they're inflamed. So they may have ankle that a little edema or a swollen. They may have fingers that's stiff in the morning. They may have pain. They may have brain fog, brain symptom that as a result of the gut inflammation causing brain issue. So this is where that brain immune gut connection comes in. Recognizing that will help people to start to look at their symptoms and their issues kind of in a 30,000 feet view, so then they don't get confused by chasing down rabbit holes that may not be the totality of what's going on with them.
Yes, so true. That's how exactly how it was for me. I didn't have any gut issues, but I had inflammation. I had, rheumatoid arthritis is what it turned out to be. But I didn't have, I wouldn't have said I had any gut issues. And it kind of, I was really lucky actually that I had a family doctor who said that my joint pain could be related to food that I was eating. And I thought that was crazy at the time. I really didn't know. But it totally was. And, if someone has, you probably see this when most people who have an autoimmune condition have leaky gut. It's kind of, they kind of go together, right? So I did have leaky gut that had to be healed. But it's amazing when you heal the gut, what can happen. So what's your kind of, how do you deal with people when they come in and they come in to see you and they've got either brain issues or gut issues or inflammation or their immune system? Like how do you begin with them?
Let's start with how they usually come in or what's usually done in a conventional model. And when I say conventional, not just in the allopathic medical model, but even in some, the natural alternative medicine model, is that, they're being treated for their symptoms. Person comes in, complain of pain, right? In an allopathic model, they're given pain medications,
Yeah, cover it up.
anti-inflammatory, these drugs that, yeah, cover it up. It's a good Band-Aid. And it's not wrong to have a Band-Aid. Sometimes you just need a Band-Aid, but you just don't want to you don't want to confuse the Band-Aid for root cause, right? So there's a time and place for everything. I'm certainly not against medication. I'm against using the medication irresponsibly and not teaching the person how to self-empower to be able to manage the condition for their life. In a natural alternative field, though, many times that's kind of, instead of with the drug, they're using a supplement. For example, people have pain. Okay, here comes the fish oil, here comes arnica, here comes turmeric, which is all great, except what's causing the pain, right? People want to treat the pain, but it's more important to identify what's causing the pain. Like I said earlier, you could have a central sensitization phenomena from the central nervous system that's mediating and gating a pain response. So in that case, we need to find out what's going on with the brain. Can we improve brain function to relieve pain? And what's even causing the brain function in the first place? So it's much more important to identify the root cause. However, there is a step-by-step approach that I take that I call it the roadmap, kind of a generic term, but it really is a roadmap in the sense that there are certain things that you want to do first, and there's other things you do later, right? Because if you just jump in with someone with brain immune gut symptom, it can seem like you have 50 symptoms and 50 problems. So many people are taking 50 supplements for 50 symptoms, for 50 problems. And I think that's the wrong approach, because it's creating too much stress on the person financially and mentally to take all the supplement. And but more important than that, it's just simply not that effective. Because if you really zero in on the root cause and you're able to take a step-by-step approach and address the most important thing first, usually you should be able to take a minimal amount of supplement and be able to see changes because you're moving things in the right direction. And once things are moving in the right direction, then you can start to change the protocol and move on to the next phase of the protocol or add other things. That's a more elegant way and more efficient way to help people get better without overwhelming them.
Mm. Okay, that makes sense. So, what do you think? I'm always interested in emotional components to this. Do you feel like there's, or do you see in your practice, emotional components to the brain, immune, gut dysfunction?
Oh yeah, it's huge. I mean, the more you practice, the more you realize, you know, you want to go after the things that's the most likelihood, right? So like in athletic, in sports, when we play tennis or we play football, in tennis, for example, we're always saying like you want to play the percentage play, the high percentage, right? You don't want to go for a Hail Mary in football. You don't want to do some trick shot in tennis. You want to do the thing that's going to give you the highest percentage of winning that point, right? So usually those are foundational basic things, right? Don't make mistakes and hit them where they're at. So emotional stress is one of those high percentage things where most people have some degree of emotional either stress or trauma. Just like most people have some degree of environmental toxin exposure, we all have to some degree to another. And for some people, that's more severe, that they have a toxicity issue. For another person, maybe the emotional stress is a bigger part of it. So everybody have a different unique combination of these different stressors. So it's the practitioner's job to identify those and see what is still there and then help the person to do the things that's going to get them the most benefit. In a person who environmental toxins is the biggest problem for them, then you got to empower that person to get rid of plastics and eat organic. That's going to give them the most payoff. Where the other person who have a lot of trauma and stress, well, stress management and trauma release will give them the most payoff. So that's what I mean by root cause, right? So everybody's going to have a different set of things, although we may have some unique situations, but we all have some common things as well. So it's about identifying what's the most important for that person that's going to move the needle the most. That's the most important.
And do you see like one more common root cause than another in your practice?
Um, yes, in a sense. So there are root causes and there are what I call the major inciting triggers, right? And even within a trigger, there's initial trigger and there's ongoing trigger. So, root cause may be, let's just say we're exposed to environmental toxin. That's, we all know that. I mean, even penguins in the North Pole have lead in their bones and blood. So we're all exposed to environmental toxin to some degree. Is that a root cause? It's a root cause on the terrain level, meaning it's impacting your internal milieu, your terrain in a way that your body may not be able to carry out certain function very well, but it's happening on a chronic, gradual toxic level that's impairing function. That's not necessarily an acute thing, right? And then so an initial trigger for someone, on the other hand, could be a car accident or it could be some type of major emotional stress like divorce. That could be an initial trigger that fund this person, their immune system get dysregulated, they get autoimmune disease. And once it gets spun into autoimmune disease or some kind of chronicity, then there's ongoing triggers versus the initial trigger. The initial trigger may be car accident or even pregnancy, right? We know pregnancy, and for some women, postpartum, they start to get, symptoms, start developing autoimmune disease. But like, what do you do with a car accident or pregnancy? Like, return to Amazon, you can't give those back, right? It already happened. But there's always some type of ongoing trigger. So the ongoing trigger for someone may be, oh, they keep eating gluten. We need to fix that. The ongoing trigger may be they're have SIBO. They need to clear that. The ongoing trigger may be the fact that they have blood sugar dysfunction, that maybe they had insulin resistance. And before the initial trigger, the car accident or not, they were doing just fine with that blood sugar that's a little bit higher, but not great, but they can still handle it. But then after that accident, it becomes the straw that broke the camel's back. That higher levels of blood sugar now becomes a problem because you're just adding on all these other layers of this toxic soup. So now you're kind of breaking the person's ability to become resilient to it. So in a holistic approach, then we're looking at, yes, the root cause, stuff that's been around for long periods of time, right, in the background that we all need to do better at. And then there's the initial trigger. Well, you can't really do anything about that, but you can understand, like, oh, that's what started it. That can explain the mechanism of why this person has autoimmune or otherwise. And then you look for the ongoing trigger to help them, to teach them how to manage it, right? And then you also look for patterns of dysfunction, be it insulin resistance or in autoimmunity or digestive dysfunction or Th1, Th2 subset imbalance between the T helper cells. Then you look for those things to create shifts in the biochemistry so that they can have better function and better quality of life, so that they're inching toward wellness.
It's like you're a detective. You're a detective putting all these pieces together and like, okay, what's the best path to go? And as you're talking, it's really reminding me of, like, I've seen lots of different journeys, but my own journey, I was having some of that for years. I was a swimmer and I started getting like sensitive to chlorine. So, that was kind of one thing. And then, there was all these other things, but then I had a major stressful year. And it's like you said, it's just like the straw that broke the camel's back, or the bucket just, it was doing okay when it was half full, but when all those stressors uh got to, the top, it started overflowing with autoimmunity. So yeah, and I think we there's a reason why we see some of these developing often later in age too, right? Because we've been building up and piling on the stresses, and then it kind of gets to be too much. But you mentioned right in the beginning about the wisdom of the body and the body's ability to heal, and it just amazes me. It really amazes me how, when we can create the right environment, the body can heal. So would you say that in your practice, that's what you're doing, creating the right environment to help the body heal?
Yeah, I would say for anybody who's doing any type of true healing, you're creating the right environment, right? Now, this could be someone who just works on emotion and they're creating the right emotional context for that person. So then their body can heal on that level. But that person with emotional trauma may need to change the context and the relationship with that trauma to heal. But then they may still have a blood sugar issue or a vitamin deficiency that without that, they can heal completely. Maybe they heal emotionally, but you still need nutrient. We don't just operate without fuel. We don't operate without having some input from our environment in the form of nutrients, right? So that's where supplements comes in. That's where nutrient comes in, because you need these nutrient cofactor so that as you're healing from something, be it emotional stress or physical stress or inflammation, you need these nutrients cofactor to drive these healing reactions so that your body can actually build new tissue and reach homeostasis, because it's all nutrient driven. So, but I think it's important that people don't take these supplements as the supplements doing the healing, right?
Right.
And even doing emotional release, the emotional release is not doing the healing. Ultimately, what's healing is our body, right? The innate wisdom of the body, which it gets a little spiritual. I believe healing is a very spiritual matter, because to leverage the healing, you have to realize that you are made by the creator with this amazing ability to heal itself. You don't even have to think about it. So, to me, that's a very deeply spiritual thing. And I think for most people, they're counting on something from the outside to heal them. It doesn't mean that nutrition and getting therapy and different treatment is not helpful. It's basically accelerating the process or to help in that matter. But ultimately, it's the body that's going to heal itself.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so you talked about fuel and nutrients. I mean, how important is that? We're constantly rebuilding, and all of our cells are turning over. So it just kind of makes sense that, especially if we're trying to heal, that we are fueling our body in the right way. So how do you take that into context in when you're helping people?
Yeah, I think and fueling, right? We all know we got to eat, and when we're eating, we're getting not just calories, we're getting nutrients as well, like proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals. And these things are used by our body for various different, biochemical processes, whether to build new cell membrane or to carry out some enzymatic reactions, or to methylate our DNA so we can, repair DNA errors, all these different processes. And I think, for me, there's several different aspects to think about fuel, right? Because fuel can simply be calorie, and we do need calories, right? So fasting is great for autophagy. There's benefits to it, but and fast forever. You starve yourself. I don't think that's going to work very good, because ultimately you still need calories to drive that reaction. So, and then aside from calorie, then you got to look at your macronutrient breakdown, fuel ourselves. But a lot of times people fuel themselves with the wrong foods, right? They're eating way too much refined carbs. They're eating too much sugar, or they're not enough protein, or not enough healthy fat, or this and that create a problem. So when I say fuel, it's not just simply eating,
Yeah.
because, you can certainly overeat as well, even the healthy stuff. But I think it's really important to think about how foods are impacting your biochemistry and your metabolism. So one example of things that I start with a lot of our clients was we're looking at blood sugar stability. Okay, because when you're eating food, eventually the energy pathway is going to come down to breaking everything down to glucose, and your body's going to use that glucose as a primary source of energy. Okay, now your body does have alternative fuel pathways of burning fat for energy in aerobic pathway. Can even burn ketones. You can even burn protein, break down protein for energy as well. Although that's not preferred, it's also very efficient. So carb, or not carb, glucose is your preferred source of energy. Now you can get glucose from eating carbohydrate, but it doesn't have to be sugar. You can get it from starchy vegetables. You can get it from vegetable fibers, the fiber that can be soluble. The insoluble fiber, of course, doesn't derive much calorie. But the blood sugar stability is one of the main things that I look for. Meaning, if you have low blood sugar, or you have high blood sugar, or you have both, which is blood sugar instability. Your blood sugar is high and then low, up and down like a roller coaster. Why will somebody's blood sugar be high and low at the same time, like up and down like a roller coaster? A lot of it's dietary driven, right? Maybe they skip breakfast, they skip lunch because they're so busy, their job is stressful, they work all the way till 2, they just drink coffee, and then 2 o'clock, they're starving, they feel hypoglycemic. So then they eat whatever they can get their hands on, some kind of carby thing, because the carbs just give them that instant energy and they feel good because give them a serotonin hit. And then they eat that, so blood sugar shoots way up, and then followed by a crash, reactive hypoglycemia with the insulin resistance. So then they feel sleepy after they eat that meal. So then they get an afternoon crash. Then they need more coffee to get them going, just to survive the rest of the afternoon. And by the time they get home, just completely burned out. And this cycle repeats. So you have these people, the combination of the dietary habits, stress habit, hormonal habit through cortisol and stress is really throwing the blood sugar out of loop. And when your blood sugar is not stable, it creates metabolism problems. Your mitochondria doesn't like it when your blood sugar is up and down like that. It doesn't know what to expect. Your brain cells are hugely dependent on steady blood glucose. The preferred source of fuel for brain is oxygen and glucose. So if you have unstable blood sugar, your brain cells are already going to be behind the 8 ball. So a lot of people are trying to improve their brain function, and they're trying to find all these mushrooms and adaptogens. That's all great. But if you don't have steady blood sugar, all this exotic supplement's not going to work. It's the percentage play, right? Like in football, it's blocking and tackling. In tennis, is keep the ball in play. Like the other guy make the mistake first. It's just got to do the foundations first before you go for the trick play. And sometimes, people are going for the trick play with the magic supplement, but there's no magic supplement. You got to do the foundations first.
Oh, I really like that analogy. And also just, sometimes it just comes back to basics, right? Just basic things can make such a difference. I mean, even drinking water, right? So many people are dehydrated and not drinking water, but also eating weird, a lot of foods that are, I, I, I heard this recently, and it's probably no surprise that most people, I forget the percentage of Americans have too many calories, but they're also nutrient deficient. So they're kind of starving, right? Because they're not getting the nutrients, and then of course blood sugar all over the place and not metabolizing well. So the right fuel is important. And so how do you like recommend people try different diets, or just, what do you tell people about food?
Yeah, so there's general recommendations, and then there's more specific recommendations for people with specific issues, right? So general recommendations, obviously, I mean, it's all out there. And I wouldn't say there's one specific diet that's right for everyone, right? It's all got to be somewhat customized. Some people might just do really well being a vegetarian, and another person might just do really well eating animal protein. So I don't really get into this argument of vegan versus animal protein, because if you work with, a lot of people, 6,000 clients that I've worked with chronic health issues, you know that they're all different.
Yeah.
So to say that everybody will benefit from one specific diet, those are the people who probably never worked with many people on a very, very high level or result. So I think it's got to be customized. But in general, to create blood sugar stability, not overdoing carbohydrates, complex source, eating tons of vegetable fibers. So vegetables is still really important. I think getting good protein intake is also really important. I think a lot of people undereat the protein, especially if you adopt vegan and vegetarian lifestyle. You can still get a proper amount of protein. It's just more difficult. And unless you're a chef or you're a kind of a nutritional expert, it may be, maybe harder than you think. You may not be getting enough and you don't know. So, but getting enough protein is important. Number one, for muscle building, right? Because you need protein to build muscle. You also need protein for the amino acid to make neurotransmitter. A lot of people suffer with mood disorder, depression, anxiety. All these neurotransmitter to help you with brain function are all amino acid derived. So if you don't get enough protein, you can't make enough neurotransmitter. Your cognition is going to suffer. Thirdly, you need protein for immune function, by the way, right? Because your body make immunoglobulins, right? You have IgG, IgA, IgM, IgE. These are immunoglobulins that make antibodies. This is your Th2 side of the immune system, where it makes antibody to have long-term memory against a specific pathogen. It's kind of like why you get sick, you have, this natural immunity is from the immunoglobulins. So that globulin is a type of protein. So if you don't eat enough protein, you're not going to have enough raw ingredient to make immunoglobulins, which is antibody production. I mean, that's the base of your immune system. So, when people have very low protein intake or not able to absorb them, right, from low stomach acid problems or digestive issues, then their immune system can just suffer. They don't get over chronic viral infections like Epstein-Barr or other herpes family virus. So it's important to get proper protein, good portions of carbohydrate, but not overdoing it, and make sure this is from a good source. Getting plenty of healthy fat, because the fat is an important component for cell membrane, for your brain cells, for myelin. So those are kind of the basics, right? Now, some people with hypoglycemia, then we might recommend that they eat more small, frequent meals. So not about just the food they eat, but the timing and how frequent they eat, right? Low blood sugar people will benefit from eating more frequently. So you wouldn't take someone who's hypoglycemic and say, you need to do intermittent fasting. Well, that would not be the appropriate thing to do for them. Well, intermittent fasting may be perfect for another person who don't have that type of issue, right? So this is where, understanding where they at and meet them where they're at so they can do what they need to do at that moment to get better. And as they get better, maybe later on they can partake in fasting, but maybe that's not the right thing for that person, right? So other people might benefit from a ketogenic diet if they have specific type of issue, and other people still might benefit from fasting. So I think there's general dietary protocols, but I think always keep in mind that blood sugar stability is really important. And the way to throw off your blood sugar is by eating sugary food, right? Because people think that diabetics say, oh my gosh, my blood sugar running low, so I got to drink some orange juice. Well, that's diabetics, right? If you're not diabetic, that's not what you would do. And even diabetic, that's not the best thing to do. They got into that stage because they didn't watch their diet. So then they're having blood sugar drops, or the medication is not managed properly. So they have to get the glucose in to bring that up so they don't pass out. But for regular people, the way to mess up your blood sugar is exactly by drinking orange juice, because you create a blood sugar spike, and anything that goes up must come down. So you get the reactive hypoglycemia, which is the hypoglycemia. So you get the insulin resistance on the way up, you get the hypoglycemia on the way down. That's exactly how you throw out the blood sugar. So this idea of like, oh, I got to eat some sugary stuff to keep my blood sugar stable, that's the wrong approach. It's actually fiber, it's complex carbs in a moderate amount, and it's protein, it's fat, and it's good amount of exercise. That's the foundational pieces.
Mm. Dr. Khan, you mentioned there about protein. Is there a formula for what is enough protein per day?
Yes, and among experts in science, what's the optimal amount? Because it depends on your activity level, depends on the condition you're in right now, depends on your age. So it all kind of vary. I think, though, in my opinion, this is just I don't have any specific, research that back this particular number up, but it seems like there's some consensus that at the very minimum, and this is the minimum, this is not like this is your goal, top line goal. This is the bare minimum, I think, should be half a gram of protein per pound of body weight. That's,
Right.
I think, is the bare minimum you should. It can go up as high as 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So maybe zero point 0.8 could be a number. How do you decide if it's going to be half a gram to a gram? Because that could be a 50% difference, right? It could be double.
Mm.
So how you decide that is based on like are you able to digest the protein even, right? And what's your protein source? Like someone who's vegetarian or vegan for religious purposes, well, we got to work with them, right? We're not going to force a vegan that's vegan due to religious purposes to eat animal product if they don't want to do that. So
Right.
we have to work with them to get the right type of animal product. And some people, they just can't digest certain type of protein because they have poor stomach acid status, because they have low enzyme status, they have leaky gut, so they're not digesting any of these proteins. So we got to work on their digestion so then they get the protein. And then third category is people who just don't know that they're not eating enough protein. Then we just got to get them to eat enough protein. Now, if you're someone who lift weight, and everybody should be lifting weight, but if you're doing exercise and you're actively building muscle, lifting weight, then protein, muscle don't just grow out of thin air.
Right.
So you got to increase protein intake in someone who exercises. You might want to mind the protein intake in someone who has chronic immune system challenges because they need that for immunoglobulins. So there's different situations that may call for different ratios of protein intake.
There was a lot of talk at the conferences that you and I just went to about continuous glucose monitors. And I wore one myself for a while just because we're all so different. And that continuous glucose monitor really gives you that I can see that show you the picture of where your blood glucose levels are. Do you use those with your patients very much?
Yeah, so more and more, and the reason is because, as you say, Jane, everybody's blood sugar response to a specific food may be different. how I how my blood sugar, how much it rises after I eat sweet potato might be different than how your blood sugar rises after you eat sweet potato,
Yeah.
right? So then this helps us to customize it. It's really I see the CGM as a educational tool for the individual client because
Yeah.
they get to see for themselves, oh, when I eat this, my blood sugar goes crazy. When I eat this, my blood sugar doesn't do that bad. So then they can self-select into eating the things that doesn't spike the blood sugar. It's kind of like a form of biofeedback, you know?
Yeah.
You do something, you see how your body does, and then you can make adjustments. And this really helps people to just kind of have an idea over time, like what they can eat that's going to keep them in an optimal level, even without CGM, right? So I don't think CGM is something you have to wear for the rest of your life. It's something that you wear for a month or two, maybe 3 at the most, because after a month or 2, if you're paying attention, you would have seen the pattern like, hey, every time I eat that, it doesn't do that well. Every time I eat this, my blood sugar does better. So you learn like what to eat and how much, portion size even matters. And then you basically just don't need a CGM anymore because you can eyeball it by just having so much experience with it.
Yeah, and there's nothing like seeing the data for well, what we're talking about is behavior change, right? Especially with food, it's a behavior change, and the motivation is what people need. So some people are motivated like by pain, but when they can see that blood sugar and how it's responding to what they're eating, or stress, as well, right? They can really understand that there is a physiological impact, right, happening. So really, really helpful. Okay, so I know that you teach people how to regulate or how to improve problems that they're having with the brain immune gut axis in a course. You want to tell us a little bit about your course?
Yes, thank you for letting me share about that. It's actually a project that's been many years coming. I started this course right in the middle of the pandemic. August 2020 is when I first created this course. But I've been thinking about creating something like that for 5 years, and I think this course is basically my effort at helping the public to be able to have um, a way to teach themselves to be their own doctor. Now, not a licensed medical doctor, right? I want to be careful what I'm saying there, but really, we're all in power, right? When Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said that heal thyself, right? Food is medicine and heal thyself. Really, what he means is that we need to learn how our body works so that we can heal ourselves without having to always go see somebody or relinquish our responsibility to a doctor or somebody to tell you what to do. I believe we can learn how to do this. And so what I've done is I created a course to teach people how to understand the connection between brain and gut and to go through a step-by-step process to learn how to self-evaluate based on symptoms. And then based on that, place yourself in different categories or different scenarios. So you will implement X if you have X problem, but you will implement Y if you have Y problem. So then it becomes customizable by people learning how to customize it themselves, right? Because when you go to the doctor, what are you doing? The doctor's customizing the treatment to you. Well, hopefully a doctor that's good, they will do that. But if you know, like, and how does a doctor customize the treatment for you? Well, they understand your symptoms and they understand what's causing the symptom, what's the mechanism. So then they're able to say, okay, this is the mechanism, so we'll do this. But this person has similar symptom, but there's a different mechanism driving it, so we'll do this. That's how doctors customize it. Oh, why can't you learn it? You can learn it as long as I speak it to you in English, right? And just make it understandable, which is one of my superpower is that I can just speak doctor in English. That you can learn it. So this helps people to be able to, give themselves more empowerment to help not just themselves, but their loved ones. So then they can become a better advocate and potentially, save money by not having to always have a consult. Of course, we're like, you and I, we're the last, right? That we're always there to offer support for anyone who needs it. But it'd be great for people to have some basics so they can do, some foundational healing. And people look better just with that. And then sometimes they need extra help and, they can go help.
I love that. This podcast is about empowering people. So I love that you've got a course that teaches people just that, because I think in so many other areas of life, we are empowered, but when it comes to our health, we've just been conditioned to pass that over to someone else who obviously knows more than us. But no one knows our body and how we respond better than we do. So I love that you're putting the power back into people's hands, Dr. Khan. So you've got this course coming up. What date? What date does it start?
We have an intro. Basically, it's called a Brain Immune Gut Masterclass. And this is an introduction to some of the concepts that we talk about in the course. So I think that'd be a great place to start for your audience if they're interested in learning the interconnection between brain and the gut. And how do you actually potentially have a way to use this information in a very usable way for the everyday people? And the class starts October 30th, 2023. And, it'll be great for your audience to get exposed to it. I would love it that you can share with them.
Yeah, well, we'll share the links. So thank you so much for having something like that to offer people. So we're actually, before I ask that question, I always ask, because this is wellness by design, designing intentionally, our health, which is what you're all about. But I love the baby steps and I love giving people something that they could do today, like without having to go out and do anything. Just what's one thing they could do today? Where would they start?
I often give this piece of advice, which is to stabilize the blood sugar. Now, I give this advice because it's the one that has the potential to make the biggest difference. And also, when you stabilize your blood sugar, the change, like what you will feel, is pretty immediate, right? I mean, if someone has low blood sugar, they get angry if they don't eat, they get lightheaded, shaky, irritable, and then they get anxious and they eat, they instantly feel better. It relieves that symptom. So fixing blood sugar has the potential to create immediate change in the symptomology, but also immediate change in the physiology, so that actually creates a foundation for other things to get better. So I say stabilized blood sugar is probably the first thing I would recommend everybody to do. And you can simply do that by we talked about the eating, the diet breakdown, just more protein, more fat, lots of vegetables, reduce carbohydrate intake, watch for simple sugars, and more exercise. I mean, it's not that hard. I think people complicate it. Some people, they get autoimmune disease, they get more complicated things going on. But for most people listening, they can really improve their health by just implementing that one simple step.
Mm, love it. Love it. And I love putting the power back. So, where are you most active? Where is the best place for people to find out more about you and the work that you do, Dr. Khan?
Yeah, I have social media presence on YouTube, and that's probably the best place because I have a lot of long form content that's free. So they can just Google Dr. Peter Khan. My last name is Kan. You'll see the bald headed Chinese guy pop up. Pretty easy to find on YouTube. So that's where the content will be, and also my website has information about our programs at askdrkhan.com.
We'll have all the links in the show notes. So just if you're watching this or listening, just scroll down to find those links. Dr. Khan, thank you so much for being here today. I really love the way you have like a practical approach and you're putting the power back in people's hands for their health and just recognizing that it's the body that's doing the healing. So thank you so much for that, for the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much, Jane.
And to all the people watching or listening, thanks for being here. And don't forget to share this. And if you like what you heard, leave a review or give us a thumbs up or leave a comment. And that helps this podcast reach more people and empower more people in their health. So that's it for today. Have a great day, and we'll see you later.